Welcome to how to change a rear brake caliper on a 2004 Saab 9.3. After removing the tire and safely blocking the car up, we remove the locking screw with a T30 Torx driver. The next thing we're going to do is locate the guide pins and remove the plastic covers from the guide pins. Once the caps are removed, you can access the end of the guide bolts. You loosen the guide bolts with a 7mm hex key. Continue to loosen the guide bolts until they're completely disengaged from the caliper bracket. Next, you'll want to loosen the brake fitting with a 13mm wrench. This fitting is called a banjo fitting. You'll definitely want to put a catch band under the brakes because fluid may leak out. After the brake hose is loosened up, you can remove the retaining spring from the brake caliper. Be careful because this could spring off. Once the retaining spring is out of the way, you can pry the caliper off the brake rotor. This may take a little work. Sometimes they're on pretty hard. Once the caliper is free, try not to just hang it from the brake line. It could damage the brake line. Now you're going to remove the pads. But as you remove the pads, make sure you notice the position they're in. There is an inside pad and an outside pad. After the pads are removed, you can just take the rotor off. At this point, you can remove the new caliper from the package, and you'll want to carefully verify that it is the same. On these cars, there is a left rear caliper and a right rear caliper, so make sure you have the same one. I will not be using the new bracket that comes with it, so here we'll remove the bracket. The old bracket is fine, and they're very difficult to take off, so unless there's some damage to the bracket, you can use your own. Now you will remove the emergency brake cable from the caliper housing. Again, be careful not to hang the caliper off of the brake hose. You don't want to damage the brake hose. Next, we're going to remove the labels and all of the plastic protective caps, the banjo fitting bolts, and the bronze washers from the new calipers. Be careful not to lose the bronze washers. You will definitely want to use new bronze washers in this installation. Once all of the protective caps and things are taken off the new caliper, you can install the emergency brake cable onto the new caliper. Once that's done, you can just hang the new caliper. Next, we'll remove the banjo fitting bolt from the old caliper. When you remove this, make sure that you have taken the two bronze washers off. Sometimes they'll stick to the banjo fitting, so make sure that you have looked on both sides of the banjo fitting to make sure the old bronze washers are gone. Now slide the new banjo fitting bolt through the banjo fitting, making sure there is a bronze washer above the banjo fitting and below the banjo fitting. Now you can tighten the banjo fitting bolt up onto the new brake caliper. Once again, when you put your caliper down, make sure to not hang it off your brake hose. We're going to remove the new guide bolts from the new caliper bracket that we're not using, and installing the new guide bolts into the bushings on the new caliper. Now you're going to align the locking screw hole on the hub with the locking screw hole on the rotor, and then slide the rotor into place. Once the holes are lined up by eye, you can take the locking bolt and put it into place and tighten it with a T30 Torx driver. Just be careful not to over tighten it. This screw gets stripped out a lot. Once the locking screw is tight, now it's time to put the brake pads on. Remember, when you were taking the brake pads off, you verified which was the inner and which was the outer pad. So make sure you put them on in the correct position. Now all we do is drop the new caliper over the new pads. It should drop down relatively easily. If it doesn't, check to make sure there's nothing in the way. Now we will align and snug up the guide bolts using the 7mm hex bit. and you only want to snug them up because you want to verify that everything is aligned. Once you've verified that everything is aligned, you can tighten the guide bolts up. Once the guide bolts are tight, you still should be able to move the caliper around. This is so it self-aligns when you're braking. Next, we're going to install the retaining spring on the caliper. This goes on pretty hard, so watch your fingers. Now it's time to get all the air out of our brake fluid. This is called bleeding. The first step for this is to find the master cylinder, which is under the hood of your car. You'll remove the cap and fill your master cylinder with the appropriate fluid. Bleeding the air from your brake system is very important, and it is a safety issue if you have air in your brakes. So make sure this step is done right. I am using a homemade brake bleeder that allows me to bleed the brakes by myself. In a lot of cases, you will need someone else to help you. If you're using a brake bleeder such as this, you'll push the hose tightly onto the brake bleeder screw, then loosen the bleeder screw up about a quarter of a turn. Then you'll slowly pump your brakes until the bubbles stop coming out of the hose in the bottle. You can purchase a bleeder system such as this from your local parts store. Make sure you check the level in your master cylinder every few pumps to make sure you do not run your master cylinder dry. After the bubbles stop coming out of the tube, you can tighten up your bleeder screw. Once the bleeder screw is tight, you can remove the hose and set it aside. Make sure you check the fluid in the master cylinder again and add fluid if necessary. This is a view of the old caliper. It was froze up and could not be compressed. It needed to be replaced. Remember, your brake system is extremely important on your car, and I don't recommend you doing this repair at home unless you're very confident. I hope this video helped you, and thank you for joining me for how to change rear brake caliper on a 2004 Saab 9.3. Goodbye.